our forum today featuring the two candidates who are seeking to become the mayor of Findlay in the November election. Today's event sponsored by the Courier, UFTV, and WFIN Radio. I'm Chris Hoax, host of Good Mornings on WFIN, and I'll serve as co-moderator of this afternoon's event along with the Courier's editorial page editor, Steve Dillon. Our participants for today's forum are Republican candidate Christina Mern and Democratic candidate Chad Benscoter. Now, Steve and I have selected the questions for this afternoon's forum, and the candidates have not been made aware of what they will be asked. And before we begin, we'll just quickly go through the ground rules. Each candidate will get a 2-minute period for an opening statement. We'll follow that with our question and answer session, in which each candidate will get 90 seconds to respond to those questions. We can ask follow-up questions to individual candidates or to both candidates. They will get 90 seconds to answer those follow-up questions, and if a candidate is called into question by the other, we can give 90 seconds for a rebuttal. We will obviously allow a candidate to finish the thought if the time period expires, but we will obviously have to cut off anyone who's taking advantage, so don't make us be the big meanie here today. Before this afternoon's forum, we drew numbers to determine who would give the first opening statement, and Mr. Benscoter will give the first opening statement.
All right, well, nice to meet you. I'm kind of a newcomer to the politics scene. My name is Chad Benscoter. I grew up very near here on a fruit farm, so I learned a good work ethic early. I was raised by a single grandfather. I went to college here in Findlay. I got my first job here in Findlay. I've met many lifelong friends, and I started a business to serve the community in Findlay. And now that I've seen a lot of Findlay through that being a business owner, a small business owner, I've seen a lot of what Findlay does really, really well, and I've seen the things that Findlay could use a lot of work on. And I think that unique insight will give me a lot of really interesting perspective on how to address the issues facing Findlay and move us to where we need to be.
Good evening. First, thank you to the University of Findlay, WFIN, and the Courier for putting on this evening's forum. It's my pleasure to be able to represent the Republican Party in the general election this November. I'm Mayor Christina Mern, and for the past few months, it's been my pleasure to serve as mayor of the city of Findlay. We're a world-class community, but that takes a lot of work. That means that we have to think strategically, we have to plan financially, we have to put our conservative values into practice and represent everyone in the community. As mayor, my background is in economics and marketing, and as a Findlay native, I attended the University of Findlay, and for the past 5 years was working as the director of business and physician development for a healthcare company, where I was on the front lines of addressing the opioid crisis, which is now turning into a drug crisis across our community. I'm uniquely positioned to address our problems with my background in finance and understand that the dedication and commitment it takes to being able to take our community to the next level. We certainly have our challenges, and we certainly have a lot of room for improvement, but I know that I can continue to lead our community, put our values into practice, and take us to the next level, both getting us our state recognition as well as international recognition as we attract so many organizations. My areas of focus continue to be, as I stated in the primary election, around workforce, housing developing, the drug crisis, continuing to improve our infrastructure, and addressing our community's needs. So I appreciate your time and look forward to a constructive dialogue this evening. Thank you.
Okay, we'll start off with the questions here. The first one, the proposal to add bike lanes to Blanchard Street and Lincoln Street has generated considerable opposition and comment. How should the administration and City Council proceed on the project? We'll start with you, Mr. Benscoter.
Well, I'm vehemently opposed to the bike lane plan, as it seems is a majority of Findlay, and I understand we need a plan for Blanchard. It desperately needs repaved, but when so many of the community says no, a resounding no, of we don't want to put bicyclists in danger and we don't want to limit traffic on Blanchard that thoroughly, we kind of have to listen. I mean, this job is as a public servant, not a ruler. And as a public servant, we have to listen to the will of the people. That is vital to this job.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Murray?
I'm in support of the project on Blanchard Street. I understand that it has not necessarily been a constructive conversation, and that's certainly the responsibility of the city. We failed the community in effectively communicating the purpose of this project. Our primary responsibility to the community is to provide safe and efficient infrastructure, and our roadways are one of those key areas. The plan that's being proposed on Blanchard Street, though may sound counterintuitive, is actually quite studied and is being implemented across the country. Taking a 4-lane road and changing it to a 3-lane configuration allows us to put in left turn lanes along the intersections, at the signalized intersections, as well as providing safer access for all of the side streets that are entering Blanchard Street. Additionally, that then allows us to have that extra pavement, the 10 feet, divided into two 5-foot paths on either side. I want to be clear, the intention of this project was not initially bike lanes. That's a secondary benefit to this project, and I think it would be ill-conceived and irresponsible of us to move away from this project when it's ultimately the safer, more efficient, and separates the vehicular traffic and the bike traffic that's already on those roadways. So ultimately, it will be up to City Council. I myself am in favor of it. I think we've received a lot of great feedback, and I understand that we should have been better at communicating. We've heard those comments. Ultimately, our responsibility is to do what's best for the community long term, even if that's not necessarily what people think they want at this moment.
Okay,
I would like to respond to that.
Oh, okay, I'll give you a short period of time.
Well, I mean, the studies they keep referencing, I mean, if we're talking pure data without context, an average kitchen counter has more bacteria than a toilet seat. Because of that, are you more reassured to make your tonight's meal on a toilet seat? No, you're going to clean your counter. So instead of putting a bike path in, which is an ancillary benefit, but it's going to lead to casualties. We already had a bike death in the past week. What we need to do is add turn lanes without reducing the paths that we currently have. We've done it elsewhere on the street already. What we need to do is make sure bicyclists are as safe as possible. And putting cars in a bike path when they have to get over for emergency vehicles or when they have to merge onto the street in general will lead to casualties.
Would you like to respond?
I believe that making the decision to get those folks out of the vehicular traffic lane, though it is not perfect. The gentleman who passed away this past week, that's obviously very saddening. That is not what we want. The decisions we have to make sometimes are tough, and they may not seem like the best option at the time, but this is the best option for this street. It's going to provide, and when folks are driving under the influence of drugs, we're not going to be able to stop that. But having bikes in the vehicular traffic lane is going to put them in more danger than providing them a safer, separate path.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Mayor Mahalik traveled occasionally while in office on government business to Washington, D.C. to discuss issues like flood mitigation and infrastructure, and to other places for duties related to her associations with mayors groups. When do you think it is appropriate for the mayor to travel, and when should taxpayers pick up the tab? We'll start with you, Ms. Murray.
Yeah, certainly if it's directly tied to the impact and role as mayor for the city of Findlay and providing benefit. For example, traveling to Washington to address flood mitigation. That's a valuable resource, and we budget that in our city budget. If it's related to other activities, then that shouldn't be picked up by the city of Findlay. There's outside funding, or I would be responsible to pay for that personally. But I think it's valuable to continue to be involved both for state travel as well as on the national and international level to represent our community.
Okay, Mr. Benscoter?
We absolutely should have the mayor traveling to represent our community elsewhere, but only if it makes sense for issues we're facing. I know sometimes people use an office like that to gain themselves clout at a national or state level, but as long as the issue being discussed is something that Findlay is directly needing help with or needing advice on, I have no problem with the city paying for it.
Okay, thank you.
To expand on that question, again referencing the previous administration, Mayor Mahalik became very involved with the National Conference of Mayors during her time in office. For both of you, is that an association that you feel would be beneficial to continue, and what are some of the key ways that you would or do hope that that association can benefit the city and its residents? We'll begin with Ms. Murn.
Wonderful. Yes, the U.S. Conference of Mayors is a very valuable organization. I have already been involved with them since taking office. It's a very great organization. There's a lot of opportunity not only for grant funding, but resources, connections, as well as the mayor's position is a unique office, and there's not another mayor in this community. So being able to have that network of individuals on varying community sizes that you can reach out to, bounce ideas off of, and seek wisdom is an invaluable resource. Certainly the city of Findlay has already benefited from the membership. The cost is very minimal. I think the city of Findlay pays less than $5,000 annually for that membership. And just last year, we received a $100,000 grant towards childhood obesity. So I think that the return on investment is definitely there. I myself am currently on the Child Health and Human Services Committee. It's important that we have a conservative voice on those committees. So it may not always specifically benefit each issue that comes out. We may not be addressing in Findlay specifically, but having that voice and being able to share our values, I think, is valuable. And so I plan to continue to be involved in that organization. And if there was opportunities to be involved that were not directly benefited to the city, that certainly would be something that I would take on as an individual expense.
Mr. Benscoter?
The organization itself would be very beneficial for Findlay. The fact that we're involved in it is a very good thing. I mean, either of us taking office, we're both very inexperienced in this job. Obviously, she has a little bit more, but it would help to get advice from much more seasoned mayors in how to properly run a city. I have zero problems with our current association. If they're giving us grant money, if it's helping get benefit to the community, it's absolutely something we should be involved in.
Thank you. Building on something that you mentioned, Mr. Benscoter, Findlay's last mayor is 32 years old. She was first elected. Our next one will be in their late 20s. What do you say to those who may be concerned about the next mayor's relative lack of government experience?
I would say experience is an important part, but the mayor does not do the job alone. They have advisors, they have city officials, there are plenty of people around that have been around for a long time to help. And I would say the fact that we're both relatively young would lead to we have a better vested interest in a long-term stability in the city. Because 60 years from now, we'll still be here. I mean, hopefully. We have a vested interest in making sure it's as great as possible for when our grandkids are raised here. So I think our lack of experience is not necessarily a bad thing. We're going to be leaning heavily on other city officials, other people that know what they're doing, and the community itself. People have been here for a long time. They know how the city works. So it just shows that the youth is caring. We actively want to make this place a better place.
I certainly agree that I think having young, fresh individuals is a new perspective, but certainly this is not a position where you can come in and operate in a silo. We have a wonderful team that's currently in positions and have been able to continue to lead our community. I think it's really important as mayor to be out and involved in the community, working with different individuals, getting different opinions and feedback on how to operate. But ultimately, I don't think that experience necessarily is something that ultimately outweighs. I think that experience sometimes can be an inhibitor because you think you know the answers. And so sometimes you don't ask as good of questions. And so I think that that's the perspective I've been taking is that I can come in and ask good questions and challenge why we're doing things the way we're doing things and ask if there's better ways that we can be operating. And so I think that it's great that we have two young individuals who are interested in the future of our community, and I'm excited to be able to continue to hopefully lead the community.
Thank you.
Good communication is critical in city government. For a short time, the previous administration employed a communications director. That idea was shelved fairly quickly, but there have been instances where miscommunication or a lack of communication with the public regarding policies and initiatives has led to avoidable misunderstandings. Is it time to return a communications director to the administration. We'll start with you, Mrs. Martin.
Wonderful. Certainly communication is key. I think in any organization, any relationship, communication is one of the most difficult things that you're going to encounter. Fortunately, my background in marketing, one of my previous roles was communication manager for a company working with about 30 physicians as well as 50 hospital executives and internal employees. Certainly, I've been trying to really put an emphasis on stronger communication within the community. Hopefully, you've noticed an uptick in content being put out on our social media, trying to get things out to the newspapers, trying to be on the radio more. That is a vital resource. We need to be proactive in communicating with individuals and citizens so that they don't feel blindsided, so that they feel engaged, that they are engaged. And so that is something that's important. At this point, I don't think we need a full-time person. I think we can look at how other individuals within our current team can help support stronger communication. But at this point, I'm really enjoying getting involved, having that ability, and continuing to grow that, and then getting support from other individuals on the team to be able to continue to improve our communication.
Thank you. Mr. Benscoter?
I don't necessarily think adding another full-time person is the best idea. We definitely need better communication. We are communicating at a certain level right now, but some of it is just fluff pieces. We need a way to actively get the important stuff out there while letting the fluff stuff out there, but there needs to be a separate way to do it. I would suggest just directly having elected officials' ears. So like a quarterly mayoral forum, a hotline, an email address they can directly send to the mayor and get a response. People love to be heard, and it's important that people are heard. So having not just a communication director, but the mayor's ear directly, I think would make people tremendously happy.
May I comment on that?
Sure.
So we do have an email, mayor@findlayohio.com. I see Kathy nodding. Kathy and I have had many conversations via email. Certainly, anytime folks call in, I frequently have citizens come into my office in need or meet them in a coffee shop. I went out to a citizen's property yesterday to look at a concern. So I think that is happening. Certainly agree we need to continue to improve that. But I think, and if they're reaching out to other elected officials and not getting responses, let me know, because that is definitely part of our job. That is the expectation, and we can continue to improve upon it.
Okay, thank you. Recently, the city filed a petition to clean up Howard Run Ditch. Some have questioned the need for the project, and others claim assessments will provide a hardship for those on fixed incomes. How would you respond to those concerns? Mr. Benscoter?
Well, the ditch should have been maintained over the many years. The fact that it hasn't been is a huge failing on our part. It absolutely needs cleaned out. I mean, anytime we can get better drainage in the city, it's a good choice. We're underwater a lot. We need to fix that. But as far as the assessment, it will be hurtful to many people. I mean, we have a pretty good middle class in the town, but we don't have everyone in the middle class. We have people, especially in that area, that will face a tremendous hardship because of that assessed tax. There has to be a better way to pay for it, whether it's through city funding, whether it's through state grants. I mean, it's fixing our water system. I would imagine the state of Ohio would care about that.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Martin?
I certainly understand the concern of folks. To add a little context, the assessment for Dalzell Ditch was about $250 over, and then spread out over 5 years. So just over $50 a year for 5 years, and then about a $6 annual maintenance. I understand that can be stressful for some folks. With Howard Run specifically, we're giving at least a year notice before the engineering is even going to occur. So I would encourage folks, if they're concerned about that, to start saving. Additionally, it will be up to City Council if they would like to contribute funds on top of what the city is going to be paying for our property that's in that area. But it is vitally important that we maintain our infrastructure. Unfortunately, historically, that hasn't been done. Those ditches are private property. The petition process is to allow the city and county to work together to take over that so that we can maintain it long term. So I know there was a lot of frustration and confusion around that and why it hasn't previously been done. I can't speak to why it hasn't been done in the past. All I know is that I'm in office now. We need to get things done, and maintaining our ditches is part of that, and that's why I filed the petition.
Okay.
But the people that are being assessed this extra tax, they're not the ones that failed to clean it up. The city of Findlay is. So we're taxing them for our failing. That doesn't seem right to me.
May I?
Yes.
So it's actually private citizen property. That's why we are petitioning it. Until that point, so actually some of the individuals that were at the hearing the other evening were frustrated, understandably so, because they were being impacted by their neighbors not appropriately clearing it. There was other folks that stood up and said, I am not in the best of health, I can't maintain it. So that's private property. We cannot go on without individuals' permission to clear those issues. That's why we're doing this petitioning process, so that we can, so that individuals aren't negatively impacted by their neighbors not keeping their property up.
Yeah, one more?
Go ahead, briefly.
We haven't used our other time
Well, yeah.
earlier, so we're good.
I mean, we're going onto people's lawns and mowing those. Why can't we clean ditches that affect everyone else around them?
Okay.
We go through a legal notice process, so prior to going onto somebody's property, we give them legal notice. We have to get permission from the courts in some cases. Certainly, if we could look at changes to the Ohio Revised Code, which prohibits us from maintaining those ditches when they're on private property, we would. But unfortunately, there's a difference in restrictions based off of Ohio Revised Codes versus city ordinances.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
The proposed reconfiguration of Blanchard Street, downtown Main Street Curb and Island project, even the reconfigured parking on Crawford Street, if you recall, all generated vocal opposition from some in the community, along with, and I'm sure that you have, if you monitor social media, certainly if you see anybody in person, they'll say, let the people vote. When do you feel it is appropriate to allow voters to have a direct say in a specific project or initiative for the city? And we'll start with Mr. Benskoner.
Well, in the case of those instances, those are vital throughways of our city. I mean, Main Street was, it's not really anymore. We kind of rerouted traffic off of it onto Blanchard, and now we want to restrict Blanchard. When it's a major throughway with a lot of small businesses on it, and we do a large vocal opposition to the city's grand plan, we absolutely need to vote on it. If it's private property, Marathon expanding, that's fine, that's their property. But when it's directly affecting the citizens of Findlay and how they get to and from work and how emergency response vehicles get to and from accidents, it's absolutely something that needs to be put up for a vote.
I guess I'm a little old school, and I believe that people vote on these issues by voting for their representatives, such as their council members. The council members are their votes and are their representatives, and their responsibility is to hear all the voices and ultimately make the best decision for the community as a whole. So I believe that every time folks go to the ballot, they're voting for then the future of their community.
And that is an ideal solution as long as they don't run unopposed every time, which is what happens a majority of the time in Findlay. I'm the first Democrat to run in several decades. So when you get a lack of choice, you get the same party doing the same thing over and over.
I would also like to build on what we were talking about with respect to communication just a moment ago, but internally, it is inevitable that disagreements on policy issues between elected officials will come up at City Hall from time to time. How best do you feel that such disagreements can be resolved? If you could describe your management style and your approach to those with different viewpoints than your own with respect to policy. We'll start with Ms. Murn.
Yeah, certainly. I think that I've made it evident since I've taken office, being able to work with various city officials, including Auditor Stashak, being able to resolve the income tax deferral process. And you know, my management style is bringing people into the room and having uncomfortable conversations and hashing out your opinions and then making the best decision for the community and walking out of the room and being able to do the same thing the next day. I'm not easily offended. I don't really take things personally. Ultimately, I'm here to get the job done and to do what's best for the community as a whole. And we can disagree. That's our responsibility, is to have that dialogue and to have those discussions and then to be able to do the same thing on a new topic the next day. So I think that getting folks in the room, having frank conversations, and being able to move on is my management style.
Mr. Benscoter?
Regardless of what your stance on an issue is, I think everyone generally wants the best for their community. It comes onto what they believe is the best thing for their community. So you have to start from there. Everyone wants the best for the community they live in. And when you get everyone sit down at a table and actually hash it out and discuss what is actually best for the community, and most of those viewpoints are just life experiences. Everyone has a different life experience, so everyone's gonna have a different view on things because that's what you've experienced. So taking all those experiences into account, you have to find a ground that benefits the most people possible, because benefiting everyone is not possible. It's just logistically impossible. But you have to benefit the most people as you can, making concessions where you need to help the most people.
I'll just interject here. I see that we have reached about the midway point of our forum this evening, so we'll go ahead and take our quick break, and we'll return with more of our question and answer period.
When it comes to your child's future, no district offers more opportunities for personal development and academic success than Findlay City Schools. Located in the heart of Hancock County, Ohio, our public school system actively works with faculty, parents, and local members of the community to provide a diverse curriculum where students have access to state-of-the-art technology so they can stay ahead of the curve. From preschool to high school, each classroom is designed to promote hands-on learning and provide students with a safe environment to make friends, inspire others, and acquire self-discipline.
Hi, my name is Braylon, and I love being in a Leader in Me school. The 7 habits help me be a great student and a great leader. My favorite habit is habit 6, synergize. When I synergize, I work with others to create a team. When we synergize, we can accomplish more than if we work alone. Go Trojans!
For students looking to explore and develop their creative abilities, Findlay City Schools offers a variety of unique programs in the performing arts. From indoor drumline and orchestra to our exciting theater program, students have an array of extracurricular activities to excel in. Home of the Trojans, nothing says school spirit like Findlay City Schools athletics. We provide a positive athletic experience for our student athletes, coaches, parents, and fans at the highest level of interscholastic sports. We offer competitive teams that promote values of sportsmanship, loyalty, tradition, teamwork, honor, scholastic achievement with leadership, and a strong sense of respect for self and others.
Findlay City Schools has great curricular opportunities for our students, and beyond that, our extracurricular opportunities include gifted education, STEM education, dual credit options, very competitive athletic programs, and a fine arts programs that are just tremendous. Findlay City Schools is a great opportunity for all their students.
Findlay City Schools. Start on the path to academic success today. When it comes to your
Mayor's Forum. We'll continue with our questioning. The next one is involving strategic planning. Strategic planning is apparently an elusive concept for Findlay. A council committee has met 7 or 8 times recently over the past year and a half, I should say, but has yet to make much progress on this subject. Where do you stand on the need for a strategic plan for the city, and how would you go about it? We'll start with you, Mr. Benscoter.
I mean, it's vital to have a long-term plan of what you're going to do. It seems Findlay has kind of been lacking that lately, especially when talking about infrastructure. We just seem to be patchworking things together and hoping it works. Having a strategic plan is important, but more important is acting on the plan once we have one. If they've been meeting that often and not really getting anything done, we need to put the coals under them, so to speak. A plan is all well and good, but we need action to make our community a better place.
Thank you. Ms. Murray?
I'm very supportive of strategic planning. Fortunately, the most recent meeting of the committee, the City Council Strategic Planning Committee, I was able to work with them, and we have submitted a draft RFP to look at having someone come in and help. The City of Findlay administration previously worked with 6 disciplines to get a strategic plan and key performance indicators for our main operations. So we're regularly looking at infrastructure updates, police and fire response, and other key measures to hold us accountable. I think that that's very important for us to do on a community-wide basis, but I believe the strategic plan that hopefully will come out, what I would like to see come out, is more of a community vision. How do we want to develop? Where do we want to grow? How do we make sure that when we do have new housing being developed, that we're not putting undue pressure on our schools? What are those big picture things that the City of Findlay administration and our operations may not have direct control over, but can help facilitate? I think that that's a much better use of our time and resources at this point. I'm happy with the work that our teams have been doing over the last couple of years to have the 2-year operating budget, as well as a 5-year capital plan, and continue to improve that. One of the areas we can improve on that, though, is communicating that to the public. So when folks call and are wondering when their street's going to be done, they can look on the website and see that. That's something that we're currently working on, and I think that that feeds very well into continuing to improve our communication and strategic planning and how we share that with the community as a whole.
Thank you. The Argyle Development Project in downtown, at least as pitched this spring, appears dead in the water. What do you think went wrong, and what can we learn from the experience? We'll start with you, Ms. Murray.
I think what went wrong was really just the developer wasn't quite ready and where he wanted to be. I think that it was a valuable conversation to be had. I think that that then allows folks to know that, hey, the City of Findlay is open to having conversations on that property. Certainly development in that area needs to occur. I think that it's not great to have such a high stakes, kind of highly visible property just sitting there empty. I know everyone would like to see that developed in some manner. But I think that ultimately that comes down to council and the individuals that come up. I think that there are other folks that will be interested in that property long term, and hopefully they'll come to us to have that conversation if they're interested in acquiring any city property to make that feasible.
Okay. Mr. Benscoter?
I mean, getting that area fixed up is definitely a big step. I think the big point of contention was the developer just wasn't ready. They They didn't really have a good plan in place to actually follow through. Nothing the City of Findlay could have really done about that. If the developer can't do anything, City of Findlay kind of hands tied.
Okay, thank you.
Many in the community were glad to see the city's practice where some businesses and individuals could delay making estimated income tax payments finally laid to rest this summer. Were you a proponent or an opponent of that policy, and what economic circumstance could you envision that would justify revisiting that policy, if any? And we'll start with Mr. Benscotter.
I'm in favor of the policy we have now of doing away with it. I mean, we all have to pay our taxes at the same time, so businesses should too. It makes for less an accounting nightmare at the end of the year. I think we just leave it the way it's changed to. I don't really see a benefit to the former policy, so I think we just leave it as is.
Ms. Byrne?
I think we've seen my opinion kind of play out in the newspaper. I previously was supportive of the practice. I think it served a wise purpose to be able to help kind of stabilize the city's revenue. However, I believe that when you have a policy or a practice in place, then you have to be able to consistently apply it and establish the expectations around how you receive it. As we went through evaluating that process and trying to create a policy, it became evident that it was going to be very cumbersome for the tax administrator to be able to put into writing the practice that he had been applying to that. So because of that, we decided that it was no longer necessary and that we could do away with the process. You know, if we got into a real bind, then we would look at doing that, but the changes that were proposed and are now in place is that that would not be able to occur. The delay of estimated tax payments would not be able to be implemented, again, without a vote from the Income Tax Board to establish a specific policy. So we are still looking at a policy just so that that is in place long-term, but at this point in time, it's not being applied to anyone.
Speaking of finances, city finances seem to be very solid at the moment, but as we all know, another recession will come one day. Some say perhaps sooner rather than later. How should the city be planning for the next economic downturn, and what is your role in that preparation?
So certainly the economy is cyclical. We have to prepare. We know it's going to be occurring. I think continuing to have strict financial processes, having a rainy day fund or an emergency fund as we currently do, continuing to put additional funds in reserve when appropriate, continuing to maintain our infrastructure and try to invest additional funds when we can, so that if we get into a time when revenue has dropped and we're not able to invest as much in infrastructure, it doesn't deteriorate around us. Unfortunately, in the last recession, we hadn't set aside funds and maintained our infrastructure. And so over the last 5, 8 years, we've really had to play catch up in kind of getting us on the right path again. So I'd like to see us continue to be wise financial stewards and put our conservative values into practice as we spend funds, while also making sure that we're investing into capital improvements while we can, so that we're in a good position when the economy does take a turn.
Mr. Benscotter?
I agree. We need to be saving money for when the worst happens. But we also need to invest in things that kind of isolate us from a national crash. Our small business community, for instance, would tremendously help keep us afloat during a recession. If it's all local money, if it's all not national chains, we're able to somewhat mitigate some of the damage from a national or global collapse.
Thank you.
While downtown and some other areas of the city have seen great growth in the past several years, there are also concerns about a growing number of vacancies at the mall and other retail spaces, as well as the loss of major retailers, most recently Staples. While much of this has to do with the changing nature of retail nationwide, what can be done at the local level to either increase occupation of those existing spaces or put those spaces to better use? We'll start with you, Ms. Murray.
I would love to see them all revitalized in some way. Unfortunately or fortunately, it's private property, and so as mayor, I have reached out to the owners of the mall multiple times, trying to give them ideas on what we would like to see out there. How can it be redeveloped with mixed-use properties, maybe residential, maybe indoor recreational facilities, a variety of different things, because the statement is very true. The retail sector is shifting and folks are buying things online. That's the reality of it. So I think continuing to encourage small business and having different retail spots downtown or in other areas is a great way to make sure that there are spots for folks to be able to shop, while also encouraging redevelopment and working with private industries, throwing ideas, putting pressure on them when we can. But ultimately, when it's private property, the government can only do so much, and that's a good thing.
Mr. Benscoter, any ideas?
In reference to the mall, we really can't do anything about it. We've seen a trend nationwide of malls are going downhill. This is what's happening. But as far as storefronts, we could absolutely try to implement incubator, accelerator, and co-working spaces, which is something that larger cities are doing effectively to use empty storefronts to help a multitude of small businesses start up, grow, and become bigger brands. So I think helping some of those landowners discover the benefits of these programs and giving them some sort of incentive to start one of these programs would be tremendously helpful to make our small business community as big as it can be.
Okay, thank you. Flood control continues to be the #1 issue for many in the Blanchard River watershed. Are you satisfied with the progress to date? And what would you do or suggest that we do going forward? Mr. Benscoter?
Well, the projects we have going now, the marshland and the river benching, great steps. But we did a flood study in the 60s, and we haven't followed through on the suggestions that they gave us then. We need to finish the suggestions they gave then. We need to, our storm drain system currently, especially where I live, is not separate from the sanitary sewer. That will not help river drainage. So we need to do whatever we can that we know of now to get water where it needs to go, and then maybe afterwards do another flood study. But I think the flood study we just did, kind of pointless, since it said the same thing the one in the 60s said.
Okay, Ms. Smart?
I'm happy with the progress that we've been making. Certainly, like everyone else, I'm frustrated that it took us so long to get to this point. But I think the benching that's currently being completed, we've already seen some benefit in the last rain events from that. There's currently engineering studies being done on a potential secondary benching area, as well as the $15 million that we received from the state in their last year capital budget to be able to put towards a Eagle Creek retention basin. I think that all of those steps are going to be very beneficial to our community. I think we can still continue to look at infrastructure updates like storm sewer separations and cleaning out our ditches and addressing those areas. Ultimately, when we have heavy rainfall events where the ground is saturated and we have flash flooding, there's going to be very little that we're ever going to be able to do to address that. We saw that across the Midwest, across the country. So helping folks prepare appropriately while also continuing to push. My role as mayor over the last couple of months has been to set a date, say we're going to have a check-in, set another meeting, hold them accountable. What are the updates? As mayor, I'm not an engineer, but I can make sure that the engineers keep moving and that we hold them accountable to make progress.
Okay, thank you.
I want to talk briefly about safety services and infrastructure. What are, in your view, the greatest needs of the city right now with respect to those categories, safety services and infrastructure? We'll start with Ms. Murray.
That is a very big question.
Big question.
That's very broad. I think overall it's just continuing to plan and overlap. I know we implemented the GIS system a couple of years ago and have not been able to fully realize its capabilities with planning both, for example, if we're going to be redoing a roadway, how do we make sure that our water and sewer work and anything is done in that area, reaching out to Columbia Gas, those different utilities are all on the same page, that when we go in and do work, we're not having to tear it up, or Columbia Gas isn't coming in and tearing it up, a couple weeks after we redid it. So I think just that continued communication and planning, which we've started, just need to continue to improve that. And then safety services, I'm really excited about the potential training facility. I think that that would really be a game changer for our community and our safety services. One of the most important steps we can take for police and fire and law enforcement is making sure that they are continually trained. If you receive training early on or just once a year you're able to prepare for a situation, you lose those abilities very quickly. Repetition is key in making sure that not only they are safe, but they're prepared to provide safety services to our citizens.
Mr. Benscoter?
As far as infrastructure goes, having a long-term plan and making sure we don't limit traffic's throughput while increasing infrastructure. Obviously, if infrastructure is bad, then emergency services can't get where they're going. Bad things happen. As far as emergency services, I would be in favor of body cams for the police. I think it would protect the police considerably and the community. And something that nationwide has been implemented, I would suggest that all police officers carry Narcan in their car.
I will expand on that because that actually was part of my, my next question with respect to not only body cameras. The city of Findlay has talked about but has not yet invested in body cameras for police officers or dash cameras for the cruisers. Should we, and what about combining the city and county dispatch centers? Would you support that type of partnership if proposed? And we'll start with Mr. Benscoter.
As I said, absolutely we should have body cams on all police officers. It protects the people they are interacting with on a daily basis, and it protects them from pointless litigation. Every community that's ever implemented is tremendously successful. And
Dispatch centers.
Dispatch, logistically it will be difficult to combine them, but I think we absolutely should. Having all of our emergency services on the same page without any redundancy is a good thing.
Ms. Murn?
So related to body cams, I'm certainly open to the conversation. At this point, I don't think it's a necessary expense. We have less, on average over the last 3 years, we've had 1 complaint from citizens submitted. Certainly if there are additional ones, you know, we'll review that. But at this point, based off of conversations I've had with our law enforcement officers, I don't think it's a needed expense. As for the dispatch, with our transition to the Tyler dispatch services, both at the county level and the city level, I think both systems are going to be more efficient. We're going to have more data to make sure there's not overlap, that they're sharing information. I'm open to the conversation, but I think that there would be a lot of logistics that would need to go into that before I'd be able to say I'm fully supportive.
Very good.
Many cities in Ohio have established community entertainment districts where adults can legally consume alcohol in designated areas. Would you support such a spot in Findlay? And what concerns do you have, if any, if one is? We'll start with you, Ms. Murn.
I'm open to the conversation. I certainly have concerns. You know what? We have a wonderful downtown area. We have a lot of folks that are coming and enjoying that. That's wonderful. I think that there are concerns about property values and the number of folks that you can kind of have out potentially endangering themselves when you allow open carry. So I would be fine in maybe doing a test area to look at that, but that's something that I wouldn't necessarily want to see very widespread.
Okay, Mr. Benscoter.
Absolutely. It would have to be a very limited area. You can't have it in a large space. I'm not opposed to the idea. I'm not a proponent of it. But I think the biggest logistic nightmare would be how many emergency personnel you have to have on scene. Because I know Bowling Green is a huge party area, and the amount of cops up there on a regular basis is tremendous. So what is the city's expense to try to make sure that area remains as safe as possible?
Okay, thank you. City Council sometimes is criticized when they pass legislation after 1 reading instead of 2 or 3. What matters, if any, do you believe warrant emergency status? Mr. Benscoter?
Emergency status, I would say, would have to be reserved for things that threaten the life of the citizens of Findlay. I think the council's done a pretty bad job lately of letting people speak their mind about issues and letting discussion be had before things are just rammed through. I think we should definitely change how we conduct city business. Instead of making everything a last-second emergency, plan it out, let community feedback happen, and don't just apologize later.
Okay, thank you.
I would like to just clarify, because there's two different issues based off of that. The first is when they are suspending rules and passing something with not the full 3 readings. Then there's a separate issue of something that is designated as emergency. When it says emergency in the specific ordinance, all that is doing is allowing them to not have to wait an additional 30 days once it does receive its 3rd reading and is adopted to be able to implement it. So I agree that limiting the number of times that rules is suspended is vital. It needs to get appropriate community feedback. We need to allow for dialogue. I think it is appropriate to suspend rules on routine things that have previously been budgeted. For example, a couple of weeks ago, we suspended rules and went ahead and authorized the payment of an insurance bill. That's something that's daily operations. We don't need to drag out the process of getting that approval and going through that when it's something we're going to have to do. We can't not pay our insurance. So that would be appropriate. I think we need to do a better job of communicating and getting the information out there. I'd like to see us plan to start putting out what the city council agenda is on Facebook. It's on our website, but not a lot of folks read that. So how can we communicate that so people are involved from the get-go on legislation that they have concerns on?
Okay, thank you very much. I think we better wrap the questions up at this point in time, and we'll move on to closing statements. And Ms. Murren, that'll be you up first, I believe.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Chad, for coming this evening and speaking. I think it's been very valuable. Over the last few months, it's been my honor to serve as mayor of the city of Findlay. I know that I have the experience and expertise related to finance, strategic planning, marketing and communications, and long-term planning to be able to serve the community as mayor. I know that we have lots of areas we can improve. That's a continual process. I'm open to have that dialogue. I want community feedback. I'm approachable, and I believe that I have the right vision to continue to build upon the successes that we've seen to keep our community moving forward. I believe that through strategic planning, we'll be able to address our housing needs, our continued workforce issues, address the drug crisis, continually to have the best infrastructure around, and exceed the expectations of our citizens. And I appreciate your vote this November. Early voting's already started. Get out and vote. I appreciate your support.
Mr. Benscoter?
Well, I'd like to say thank you for hosting the event. Thank you for showing up. Thank you all for coming. I think I'm the candidate that most represents the people of Findlay, as I am a blue-collar worker. I am a small business owner. I believe I resonate more with the people of Findlay because I am one of the people of Findlay. If you want a mayor that actually listens when you give feedback instead of disregarding it, that's me. If you want a mayor that sees the problems that the average person faces on a daily basis, nice to meet you. If you want someone that's responsible financially and socially, absolutely. If you want someone that cares about property rights, hello. If you want someone that cares about the small business community and making sure we are the best small business community in the nation, nice to meet you. I think I am uniquely positioned to do all of these things to help end the drug epidemic, to make sure our infrastructure is as smartly put together and safely put together as possible. And I look forward to your vote on November the 5th.
Thank you very much.
And with that, we conclude our mayoral forum for today. We would like to thank the candidates for taking part. Also would like to thank the Courier, UFTV for televising today's forum, 1330 WFIN and 95.5 FM for live radio coverage. Again, as was mentioned earlier, early voting is already underway and Election Day is November 5th. For Steve Dillon, I'm Chris Oakes, wishing you a good evening from the University of Findlay. Thank you.